the parenting coordination is very similar to a mediator. And there are times that I would say that mediation is part of being a parenting coordinator. You have to utilize those skills as a parenting coordinator. So I've done mediation training to help with parenting coordination. But as far as the guardian ad litem goes, again, similar, but the guardian ad litem I see as more of an advocate for the child's needs overall.
Welcome to the Herlihy Family Law Podcast, your trusted source for expert insights on navigating family law matters with clarity and care. Whether you're tackling tough decisions or seeking guidance for your family's future, we're here to help. Let's get started.
Hi, today we're diving into a really important topic for anyone who's going through a divorce or custody case, the role of a parenting coordinator. I'm thrilled to be joined by Caroline Taylor, an experienced parenting coordinator who works closely with families to help manage and resolve conflict during these challenging times. We'll talk about what a parenting coordinator does, how they can help, and why they can make such a difference for parents and children alike. Caroline, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up working as a parenting coordinator?
Sure. So I have a undergrad degree in child development from Florida State University, and then a master's degree in counseling from Auburn. And I've worked with kids in a bunch of different capacities throughout my career and really kind of drilled down on family dynamics and working with families in divorce situations. After graduate school, as I began working as a therapist. And I had a really great mentor that was a psychologist, and she paved the way for us. The two of us went and became certified in parenting coordination, and she really helped me understand, and we learned together how to be parenting coordinators and how to help families that are kind of intractable dynamics or in high conflict cases, family law cases. So that's how I got here. And really the role over time has changed. There's been the AFCC, the Association of Family and Conciliatory Courts, has issued a few different guidelines throughout the years of parenting coordinators. And so the role in and of itself has changed some, but it's the same general kind of principles.
Well, that's so interesting. I mean, I know from the kind of situations we see dealing with our clients who are going through divorce and custody cases, intractable is a great word, and high conflict is a really apt word, because I mean, we just see that time and time again, especially when people are going through really intense litigation.
Yes. Yeah.
For those who aren't familiar, what exactly does a parenting coordinator do?
So in Alabama, we don't have a statute that outlines necessarily what exactly the role is to entail. So it depends on what the order is appointing the parenting coordinator. But in general, a parenting coordinator works with parents kind of as with the children in mind and the overall family system in mind, to make recommendations to the court in the event of impasse between the parents on general parenting duties. So that could be anywhere from extracurriculars to for the children, to communication between the parents and things like that. So that's the general, I would say, the general definition. There are other things that you can do as a parenting coordinator, but that is it in a nutshell.
In what types of cases is a parenting coordinator typically appointed or recommended?
So I would say most cases are what we would term high conflict. Which would be the families that have been in court on, several occasions on modifications, or a family that has higher need for one reason or another. There's also families that a parenting coordinator can be appointed when they want to have more of a agreement-based approach to their divorce. So I'm seeing that a lot also, is that, two parents might go into their attorney's office and say, hey, we really want to work out our divorce situation, our settlement together. And those people might not, they're the opposite of high conflict. They want to work with a parenting coordinator to come up with their general parenting plan.
Yeah, we might call that like a collaborative type approach, right?
Somewhat, yes. So those would be the type families that parenting coordinators work with.
I know I personally have been seeing more and more clients who understand that maybe litigation isn't the best path, and they're looking for alternative ways to try to do what's best for their kids. And I think a parenting coordinator can really help with that.
Yeah.
Explain a little bit about how your role is different from that of a mediator or a guardian ad litem.
So, I've never served in the role of a guardian ad litem. So I can just say from what
You're not a lawyer. That's one thing.
That's right. So I can just say from what I have seen is that, it is somewhat similar. The parenting coordination is very similar to a mediator. And there are times that I would say that mediation is part of being a parenting coordinator. You have to utilize those skills as a parenting coordinator. So I've done mediation training to help with parenting coordination. But as far as the guardian ad litem goes, again, similar, but the guardian ad litem I see as more of an advocate for the child's needs overall. And that is not, as a parenting coordinator, while you're taking into account the child's needs overall, you're also incorporating what is helpful for the whole family dynamic. And so that's something to keep in mind that I think would be different than maybe a guardian ad litem.
Yeah, for sure. What kinds of issues do you typically help families resolve?
Gosh, there's so many. I just, I would say probably the most one that I work on a lot, I would say, is communication between the parents. So that's something as a parenting coordinator that I really like to work on, is help the parents establish a new foundation for communicating with each other and working better together. So giving them skills, rebuilding their relationship in a more business-like format. So it's not, taking the emotion out of it. So in that way, parenting coordination is so much different than therapy. It's not process oriented. We're really looking at
it's like results oriented.
Yeah, we're really looking at solutions. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So I, as far as issues that I work with families on, I would, like I said, communication, but also, a lot of times it'll be more specific issues like substance abuse or and how to navigate substance abuse of a parent in the access to the child and monitoring the substance abuse. Or it could be, working with parents who have some kind of supervised visit or issue or mental health issue, and collaborating with the other professionals in the family system. So other therapists or the attorneys to work together to help the family have the best possible solution without having to constantly go in front of the judge for answers.
Yeah. It's interesting to me too that you would bring up communication first and foremost, because, I think a lot of times the reason people are getting divorced is because they've had such a major communication breakdown. But when children are involved, you've got to still find a way to work together and communicate for what's best for your children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's what most parents want, even though it's kind of hard for them to see that.
Yeah. And it's a whole new way of communicating too. So, I encourage the parents to deal with each other, communicate with each other in a series of proposals rather than, the deny, deflect, defend um, route that is typical in families where there's, divorce going on.
Right.
So
So it's like an example of that would be like parent A says, do you think Susie should play softball? And then parent B is like, if you weren't such a blah, 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 we wouldn't be in this position, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And so what I would want parent B to say is, I don't think Susie, would be best fit for softball. And she played basketball last year. Can we focus on basketball instead? Or if she wants to play softball, could we work on a, special lesson or something, so coming up with other solutions and ways to compromise to reach an outcome that both parents can buy into to a certain extent. Now, I think that this is a piece of the parenting coordination role that is important to consider, is that in the event of impasse between the parents, I always want them to exhaust all efforts to try to make solutions together because they are the expert on their family. But in the event of impasse, that's when the parenting coordinator can make a recommendation directly to the attorneys in the court. And depending on the jurisdiction, the judge will either incorporate that into an order or sometimes has a hearing. But it just depends on where the parenting coordinator is in the state.
So that's the interplay with the court process there.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you typically work with both parents to help keep things fair and focused on the children? Like what I was thinking when you were talking earlier, I mean, it's really important to keep it child-centered versus centered on the interpersonal conflict between the parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's difficult. I mean, obviously, but I will often let them communicate their positions, and then we'll bring it back to, okay, well, what does your child think about this? And often in these higher conflict situations, the parents have differing ideas of what the child, what's best for the child.
Right.
So in that case, and in the majority of the time in a high conflict situation, the child also has a therapist. And so I will often, or a guardian ad litem, or both. And so I will often confer with other professionals and try to keep it focused on what's most important to the child. So in that way, by bringing the child's therapist's thoughts and ideas into whatever the impasse might be, when we're talking.
What are some of the biggest benefits you see when parents use a parenting coordinator? Like how can that really help people that are in tough situations?
Well, I think there's a number of ways that it can help. I mean, just with a timing perspective on some of the more complicated family dynamics where, like I said, there might be substance abuse issue or maybe, supervised visit that needs to progress in a certain way. It would be difficult to get in front of the judge on a regular basis and have an updated plan of moving forward. So from the simple fact of timing, it's helpful because we can get together, we can evaluate the progress, the attorneys can be looped in, and there can be, a progress made on moving forward, whatever that may mean for the family. It's also helpful for other families to, like I said, kind of create that different foundation or structure for moving forward where you're going to have some, a new standard operating procedure for the family that everybody's living by this new set of rules. So it gives you a new foundation on the other side of the modification or the divorce. And I think, worst case scenario, the parenting coordinator can be an objective witness if it comes to that at the end of the case.
Yeah, kind of that barometer of who's being reasonable and who's being unreasonable, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I tell you what I think is one of the biggest benefits of it.
Well,
Well, if a parenting coordinator is not involved, then a lot of times the clients have to rely on their attorneys like us to resolve their parenting disputes. And, most of us don't have training in how to do that or what the most constructive ways are, and so you get a call at Friday afternoon about like Susie's birthday party that's on Saturday, and it's not really a legal question, and a lawyer is not the best person to handle that problem.
yeah.
But that's who ends up doing it. And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's not a good thing,
And I think to your point with that is that if you are your client's advocate, then you are not necessarily thinking about how the advice, or you may not be, some lawyers do think about this, but how your advice might impact the family system overall, kind of in the long run. And so when you're talking about the birthday party situation, your advice to your client might be something different than what would be beneficial to the long-term health and prosperity of the family. So
Right.
yeah.
And I mean, it's important to note that, I mean, lawyers are duty bound to advocate for their clients. And so sometimes that might be in line with what's best for the family unit as a whole. But with some people in some situations, that might be adverse to what's best for the family unit as a whole. That's a great point, Caroline.
Yeah.
What are some common challenges or misconceptions about what you do?
I think some misconceptions might be, you said, how do you do parenting coordination where it's fair? And I think maybe a misconception is it's not always fair, but it is always objective, or at least it should be. And so I think that is something that I always talk to my clients about when it comes down to, wait a minute, you're on his side or you're on her side, or, that I'm trying to look at this. My job, my role is to remain objective and to hear what both of you are saying and to help you reach a resolution that hopefully you both like, or maybe that you both don't like, or that we can compromise on. And so that is somewhat of a challenge to remain neutral and objective and help the client see that that's what's going on, that there might be issues that, on one issue, it might seem like the parenting coordinator could be on one side, maybe the father's side, or on the next issue, maybe the mother's side, or maybe has a mind of the parenting coordinator has a solution of their own. And so it's important to just kind of, maintain that objectiveness, and that's often a challenge,
Yeah. How is a parenting coordinator selected in a case? Do parents get to choose? Does the court choose, or does it depend on the situation?
I think it depends on the situation. Often the court chooses. Often the attorneys choose, and it's just an agreement by the attorneys. There have been times where people have reached out to me just directly and said, hey, we want parenting coordination. That is more rare. But maybe a case that has, or a family that has had litigation in another state will generally reach out directly to me to try to get parenting coordination started, if they move or here or whatever. But it's mostly appointed, I'd say by a judge or by agreement of the attorneys.
What is there any advice that you would offer to parents who are considering maybe asking for a parenting coordinator in their case?
One thing that I can't stress enough is that, given that we don't have a statute in Alabama that directs parenting coordinators and the education that a parenting coordinator and training that a parenting coordinator has, I think it's important to fully vet their education, background, experience, and most importantly, training. so that you can know that the parenting coordinator that you've selected is, upholding appropriate guidelines or has the training required to perform the role. So I think I would say that is the main thing. And also, I think to a lesser extent, it's good for the attorneys to have somewhat of a professional relationship with the parenting coordinator. So as you're looking for a parenting coordinator, to run it by your lawyer and make sure that your lawyer is familiar with the process and feels comfortable with the parenting coordinator overall. But I would say the most important thing is the training. And
yeah, great point. What can parents do to best prepare to work successfully with a parenting coordinator?
I would say the first thing is understanding that parenting coordination is not therapy. So, there's lawyers that perform the role of parenting coordinator also. And so to consider that when you come into these meetings with the parenting coordinator, to conceptualize it somewhat like maybe in mediation, in that you are going to present some ideas or issues and then hopefully work out a solution. It's important not to have an idea of your position maybe when you're coming into the meetings, but also understand that you're going to be asked to compromise and work with your co-parent for the betterment of your family. So I would say those two things. Understand that it's not a process-oriented process, that you're not going through your emotional issues from your marriage or your relationship.
Yeah, whereas therapy is much more about processing your emotions, and this process is much more like problem solution, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to add that we haven't talked about that you wish people knew or understood more about the role of a parenting coordinator?
I think that it would be great if Alabama would have a statute. I think that would go a long way in uniforming kind of the way that all parenting coordinators act and operate. And like I said, there's not just therapists that act as a parenting coordinator. Attorneys can also act as a parenting coordinator. So it's important to know that parenting coordination, another difference in therapy is that there's not any kind of diagnosis that is given to either one of the parents or a child. And so insurance is not appropriate to bill in parenting coordination. This is an alternate dispute resolution process. And custody issue in most cases. So it's not appropriate to take insurance. So I think that is important to know about the process distinction.
Where can listeners learn more about you and the services you provide?
I have a website, so you can just Google my name, Caroline Taylor, LPC, in Birmingham. And also have an office in Mobile. And so you can just Google me or my email address. I'm sure you can give it to them if they reach out to you directly.
I'd be happy to.
You can find me online pretty easy. You can also go to the AFCC website. There's a lot of information for professionals and for parents about parenting coordination and about the other roles that are held in legal type relationships with professionals. And they have some great resources. So I would say check them out also.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I've been to a few of the AFCC conferences in years past, and they're fantastic.
Yeah, the professionals that are involved with the AFCC are always very well trained and knowledgeable, and up on all of the research, and so it's a good organization to be a part of.
That's definitely been my experience too. Well, Caroline, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise about parenting coordination. For those of you listening, I hope today's conversation gave you a better understanding of how a parenting coordinator can support families in divorce and custody cases. If you want to learn more about parenting coordination, or you have questions about whether it might be right for your situation, feel free to reach out. We're always here to help. And thanks again for listening to the Herlihy Family Law Podcast. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the Herlihy Family Law Podcast. Remember, you don't have to face family law challenges alone. Visit HurlihyFamilyLaw.com or call 251-432-7909 to learn more.